Alright, good morning everybody. I'm out here in the shop and I'm pulling the floor pans out of that Argo. I want to have a look at those drive chains. I'm going to pull the front driver's floor pan out of there, right there. I got the 4 bolts out that hold that in there, and I'm going to pull that pan out of there. So, before, I brought out the owner's manual now. You get a little owner's manual. It just tells you the basic things in this Argo operator's manual. Tells you a little bit about the maintenance and stuff on there. So I went to that. Anyway, pull a firewall, which I did. You gotta pull that firewall first, right there. And that allows you access to all your clutch, your chains and everything. And then you can take your floor pan out. But you know what? She's nice and clean underneath. I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning. And as you guys can see, there you go. That's how she works, man. Chain to chain, axle to axle. There's your first set of wheels. And they are in turn coupled to your middle set of wheels right there. And finally to the back wheels. But anyway, I also want to clean this out. So that in turn now, with those pulled out and this rear floor pan, just like a WeatherTech. Just like a WeatherTech. She's molded to the back end, and that allows you to get at your rear chains right there. That's all that's in there. So once you pull out your firewall and those 2 floor pans, you get access to your clutch, everything by pulling it apart. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about maintenance intensive. I knew these Argos were maintenance intensive long before I even bought one. I knew the drivetrain, the chains, the sprockets. I didn't know exactly how things were held together, but as you work on them, I guess you get better and more efficient. But anyway, just looking at this thing here, unless you're into mechanical or mechanics or have a shop or a garage and you don't mind or you have the time working on these things, then you know what? Looking at this, I would probably honestly say stay away from them, really. If you're not in the, or you'll have to pay somebody to do all the work for you, and that can probably get pricey too. But me personally, these are for a niche buyer. Somebody like me who's maybe got a logging road and some land and they want to just toodle in and out and not into hard recreational fast riding. And that's why ATVs and UTVs dominate the market. These are for the niche buyer. A guy like me, slow and pokey, and fools around with them in the shop. You have to kind of enjoy that mechanical a little bit too, and learning about them. I went to the hardware store and luckily they had it. And this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to try it and then I'm going to price it on the net and see what it's worth. But I'm going to run this Castrol chain lube right here. And I think it's actually impregnated a little bit with graphite. I'm not sure, but I think I've used it before. And anyway, it's recommended for O-ring and conventional chains. So doesn't matter whether you got a conventional or you got a lubed O-ring chain, whatever. This is what I'm going to use. I've used it for many years and I've had good luck with it. So Castrol chain lube right there. It's like I said, chain lube, conventional and O-ring chains. And really, I'm going to check the chain tension on these and I'm going to have a little look, but I'm going to start it up and just drive and spray these chains too, and just make it a little bit easier. All right, so I got the firewall out. In order to actually get on these chains and actually look at your drive system, seat, firewall, rear WeatherTech plastic mat, aluminum floor mat. So those are all your access points you got to do to get in there to work on this. And another thing I did something else I did too when I got this machine. I don't know why North American companies do this, but they do. And I just see that American stuff on the ASV, Canadian stuff. Things are sometimes a bit mechanically crude and they're just funny. And it shouldn't happen, but it does. So this rubber boot right here, where your gear shifter comes through the dash. Every time you shift gears, I put it back in place like 3 times, like, okay, enough is enough. This boot would pull right through the dash and it would get all curled up around your shifter. You could put it back in position to clip in the dash here with these serrated edges. It wouldn't last 2 shifts, so I go, okay, enough's enough of that horse shit. So I didn't want to do it, but I had no choice. I had to 4 screw into the plastic firewall, 4 screws to hold this boot in there. So now if you take the dash pad or the firewall out on this, not a big deal. You just have to unscrew your shifter, and then you just slide the whole thing over top of the boot. But that's just kind of typical North American engineering. Just little shit like that. It's always been that way with North America. North America can make good stuff, and they can build some quality stuff, build it okay, but I'll tell you, they're not nearly as refined, and they never have been, as the Japanese, ever. And they probably never will. But anyway, so I fixed that, and I'm underneath here, and I'm just having a look. Have a look around. Look at the chains. Look at her. So what we'll do, I'm going to start this up. All right, so have a look at this. There's your drivetrain. There's your centrifugal snowmobile clutch. There are your disc brakes. A disc brake on each side of that gearbox. One side drives, left side, turn your steering wheel. Left side locks up, right side drives. You want to turn the other way, which will be turning to the right. Lock up your left side, and the right hand side will lock up, and your left wheels will drive. That will turn you to the right. Right hand side drives, left side locks up, that will turn you to the left. Kind of a neat system, and that is all done via these brake calipers right there. That brake caliper, this brake caliper on your discs are tied right into these 2 brake reservoirs, and they are in turn tied into the steering wheel. So as you turn your steering wheel via a spool valve inside, you're pushing brake fluid down to your brake caliper, and you're squeezing your brake caliper, and vice versa for the other side. So when you turn your steering wheel on this circuit, you're pushing your brake caliper forward on one side, depending on which way you turn. You push your piston in your brake reservoir forward, and it in turn pushes oil down to your brake caliper, which is there, and squeezes your brake caliper, and that's all it does. Left to right with that handlebar, like I said, just like basically a car automotive system. Pushes brake fluid down to the brake caliper, squeezes on your disc, and stops you from driving. That's your turning system on this. And your brake system, this is your emergency brake system here, just looking at it. And if you look, right there, that's your e-brake. Let it off, and the e-brake locks up both discs. There you go, right there. And that's done right there on the dash. So this is your e-brake. These are your brake calipers. Like I said, that squeeze. It's kind of a real basic setup on here. A little bit cumbersome to work on, looking at it in some spots, getting in there, especially if you got to do those inner flange bearings and stuff. And there's one thing I see on here that I don't like, and I'm not sure why. This chain here, as far as I'm concerned, is way too tight, and I don't understand why. I mean, it's never been touched from the factory. Yet the other side over there is not tight at all. These are your chain tensioners. Right here. These nylon, Nylar. Right there. Those are your chain tensioners. I don't know if hopefully you guys can see. Okay, that's better. There's your chain tensioner right there. It's got a spring on this side and a spring on this side that keep constant upward pressure on that tensioner to keep those springs going. Drive shafts on this. One flange bearing on the inside. One bearing clamp with a flange on each side here, compresses it and keeps it in the bearing housing right there. This is a 3-piece setup. Just by looking at it, you've got a inner housing, outer housing. You set your bearing inside, tighten your bolts up, and it clamps. Both sides of the housing clamp around the bearing and hold it in position. And that's your inner, and there's your outer bearing in there. Maybe not the best explanation on YouTube, but anyway, that's what I see so far, just getting into this thing and feeling out this Argo. And now I'm going to lube up them chains. And now I can see why every guy that's working on an Argo has rubber gloves on right there. And I'll have to get some out. So for now, we're going to lube up these chains. I'm not happy with the set tension on those two front drive chains. They don't have tensioners on them. They are basically preset, certain chain length for the center to center distance on that, and that's all they are. You couple them with a master link, I would say, and you might have a little forgiveness in, possibly, in your bearing holes when you mount your bearing. You might have a tiny little bit of forgiveness in there, but that's about it looking at it. And there you go. And that's really all I wanted to do today, was check out the chains and sprockets, have a little look at these bearings. I'm going to grease these bearings too, and get that Castrol chain lube on there. I mean, even though this guy I bought it from, and it's got very low miles on it, this Argo, you have to keep on top of them. And like I said, these machines are not for the timid mechanically, I can tell already. And okay, a simple grease job, checking chain adjustment, and cleaning this inside and checking everything over turned into an absolute nightmare. almost a new machine, might be 3 years old, but it's only got 90 miles. What a nightmare already. What an absolute nightmare. I see from the factory, it looks to me like somebody put an inner flange bearing in here on your main final drive on the front coming off the motor. Down in here. Way down underneath there. I don't even have a goddamn light. Anyway, I slid this sprocket over. This sprocket has been split over. The snap ring I took out of the machine groove. I slid this over, and way down underneath here, way down, there is a grease fitting under there that is impossible to get. In fact, that grease fitting's put in the wrong position from the factory. That's what I think. And that grease fitting, instead of being down below, should have probably been up top, facing the back, so you could get at it, at least possibly from the front here. But no, it looks like some moron put it on the very bottom. The other side, it's on the very top. You can't see it right now. But over here, some idiot put it on the bottom. And with the sprocket all the way over and the chain on here, it is impossible to grease that bearing. And I know that because it's never been greased. I pulled the chain off, slid the sprocket over, and I can barely still get in there to grease it. Something's got to change. I got to change the orientation of that fitting. And there's only two ways to do that. You would either have to pull all the bolts out of that flange on that final drive in the front. You'd have to pull all the bolts. That's a nightmare in itself. And rotate the whole bearing to bring the grease fitting up around the top to the back where you can get at it. I can tell you right now, that was installed upside down by some careless assembler. And she got the big thumbs up when it was done just because it ran good. But guess what? He fucked it up. The other side, the fitting is up top, so you go through the top and you can get at it. This one, it's at the very bottom, and you cannot get at it. I tried everything. I mean, I tried everything. I even put my long needle adapter on here. I concocted a 1/8 NPT nipple, and I put my needle on there so I could get in there. Impossible, even with this needle. This has never been greased. I looked at it. It has no grease in that fitting. It hasn't been touched. Whoever took care of this machine, the last guy, the poor bastard, he just said, fuck it. Like, he couldn't get in there, guaranteed, so he just left it. But he did grease every other fitting. All the other ones were good. And on 2 of these wheel bearings, on the outside bearings, I pumped them full, and I had like 6 drops of water come out of 2 out of the 6 bearings. So I kept pumping them, had no choice to push the water out of the seal, and luckily I greased them all. But this mother down here, what a nightmare this is. This is going to have to change because you have to grease that bearing on a regular basis. So I'm up to my asshole in alligators right now, and I'm going to have to change the orientation of that bearing. Or I'm going to have to pipe it in different, and I don't know how. I'm just working on that now. All right, you guys. I showed you that fitting on that final drive back in behind that lower drive sprocket that you cannot get at. I think it was put in backwards or upside down. The grease fitting was put at the very bottom. It should have been put at the very top facing the back. That's what I think. So I just took it out. This is the guy that was in there. It's only seen grease from the factory where the bearing was manufactured. It's never seen grease since. I know it hasn't, because there was no telltale signs of any grease on this fitting that matched all the other grease. So you couldn't get in there. It was impossible. So this fitting was on that flange bearing facing down like this. You could not get in there. It was impossible. So what I did was, I'm going to split this grease fitting, and by doing that, what you do is you take out the front piece of the fitting, which is right here. This little guy right here. You unthread him from your bulkhead right here, and you end up with this. Nothing on the front, just the hole where the grease, where the little nipple was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread this back in, get it in position, and I'm going to put what I found here in my grease fitting drawer, an extension on there. And what it's going to do is go in there and I'm going to have it facing the back where I can get around with a grease gun and get on the back. Now, that may mean that I don't get this perfectly tight. I may have to go all the way around and just get it snug enough where it faces the back, which isn't a big deal. And then I will put this guy on, like so. And this will face the back, and that will allow me to reach around behind the chain, behind the sprocket with a grease gun. This may be loose though, not really loose. It's going to be at the most 180 degrees loose, probably half a revolution loose. So I'll take it back, and it may come around and it may hang loose. I don't know, but it'll never unscrew simply because of the length of this. So hopefully that should solve the problem. It may hang down when I'm done, or may not. Maybe I'll get lucky and get it snug enough to stay in that position right there. We're going to find out. But it doesn't matter, because this is bullshit. If you can't get a grease gun on there and to grease it, you're going to lose that bearing. And that is on your final drive on the front, your main drive. And that's harboring 2 drive chains on that bearing too. So it's even taken more load, that bearing. So it's imperative that no matter what, you have to correct it. And what a nightmare, holy f***. But anyway, so that's what we're up to. I'm going to put this in, and I'll get back to you when I get it in, and I'll try and get some light in there and I'll show you. All right, good day everybody. Mike here, Northeastern Dirt and Property Maintenance. I am out in the shop. And thank God I am out in the shop, because have a look out here. It is just nasty. I mean, it is nasty out there. And a bit noisy in here. All right. So I got the Argo back together the other day. And as I showed you guys in that video, I rerouted that deepest inner driver's side flange grease fitting at the very bottom, and I spun it around. I put an extension on it like I showed you guys, and I pointed it toward the front of the machine. And now if you want to grease it, it's still a nightmare, and I'm going to change it because I have an idea. So now you can at least maybe get in there, reach around the sprocket and chain at the very bottom from around behind, fold yourself in half, use your double joints, get in there, and at least maybe you can grease the fitting now. And yeah, so that was kind of a nightmare. And like I said, there's a few funny things with this Argo I don't like in the engineering aspect of it. And that comes to certain parts of it with chain tensioning, with no chain tensioners at all, where your drive chain on your final drive is the exact measurement you need, and there's no tensioner. You're supposed to squeeze it with a pair of vice grips as tight as you can get it, basically, and then put your master link in. It's a bit of a shitty setup. It's not, I don't think it would be something that I would give the big thumbs up to the engineering department at Argo. There's a few things, but of course with anything I own, I always find some flaws, but they're generally, you can recover from them. But some of this stuff here in this Argo, and I'll tell you, I know what I would do, and I'm going to do it, and it's going to be at one of my projects, I think. Here's what I'm going to do. First I have to find it. This piece of square stock aluminum is going to become a grease header. I'm going to drill this down, and I'm going to put 4 to 6 1/8 National Pipe Tap grease fittings in here, and I'm going to have compression fittings with high pressure nylon hose out the bottom, and it's going to snake its way through, and it's going to go to all those nasty fittings that you can't get. And I am going to mount it here. I am going to mount it down here on this main frame, probably somewhere under here, like this. where you can come along with a grease gun and you can grease through here, and I'm going to put all the grease lines down through here along the floor of the machine and along the frame, and I'm going to tie them in. That's just an idea that I've been thinking. I looked at some of the lubing companies out there, and they've got short greasing headers you can actually buy, but I've got the aluminum here, and I can probably drill and tap it. Oh, I know I can right here in the shop. Just as easy, and I can get my compression fittings in the city. But anyway, that's not what I'm up to. I got this together. So what happened was, my fault. It's just a live and learn situation. When I lubed up all these chains down there, I think when I sprayed that Castrol spray lube on there, I might have got a little overspray, which I probably did, or when I ran the machine, it flung itself onto these steering brake discs, and then the machine wouldn't steer on either side after that. It would slightly steer, but I obviously got some oil on them, and I lived and learned from that. So all I'm going to do today, I bought some degreaser, I bought some chlorinated brake cleaner here, and I'm going to spray down these pads a little bit, and these brake rotors, I'm going to wipe them down a little bit, and we'll go from there, and hopefully I can regain some of the steering back. But that was a big foobar on my part. All I'm going to do is spray it, wipe it down. And I got the machine up in the air. And I'm going to wipe as much as I can of these on. Then I'll just rotate the wheels. And hopefully I can regain some of my steering. Hopefully you guys can see that. And I'll just wet the rag and I'll do the other side. I do have some steering. I never lost it completely, but I'm not impressed. That was my screw up. And you can see what you get. If you have a look what you're getting on that rag. That's just, I'm going to call it overspray. And this stuff is definitely not healthy to breathe. We'll go do the other side. The machine's in neutral, so all you got to do is just turn the wheels out here, or you can even turn it on the final drive. We'll see if that made a difference, because ultimately it was slipping before I could see it in here. And if you look at the machine, that's how I keep it jacked up off the floor to do the work right there. Simple trolley jack lifted up. Right there, 2 4x4s in the plank, gives me a couple inches off the floor, allows me to freewheel everything without having to push the machine. And there you go on the back. One safety stand into the trailer hitch. I probably got now 3 inches of room under the machine. I just already found out it's a lot easier to jack the machine, get it off the ground, spin the wheels being one man by hand and doing it, versus I've seen some guys lubricating the chains or whatever. They're actually leaning over and rolling the machine and trying to spray, and each to their own, but I'd rather just do it like this. And now this allows me to run the machine by myself up in the air and with no issues. Okay, we're going to fire it up. This is a bone cold start up here too. Before I had a bit of slippage afterwards. And when I took the machine out in the driveway, I turned the wheel and it was just giving me barely any steering. So I see right away it's already locking up tighter on those discs. So that was my fault for overspraying a bit of chain lube. And next time I'm gonna have to be a hell of a lot more careful. That's your emergency brake right there. So anyway, you guys, that grease fitting I showed you guys earlier is way down on this flange bearing where my finger is, way back in here behind the chain, behind the sprocket, behind that flange bearing, down low, almost on the belly pan of the machine. Now, if you want to grease, you got to reach around the back in here, get your grease gun in the very back and get grease into it. So we'll see what the future holds here, because I haven't even hardly had any time to drive this thing, really. And we'll see what the future holds here in this machine. And if I decide to keep it, whatever. We'll see what happens. Like I said, I'm going to put a grease header on the front of this. I already know, and I see the vision of what I need on the front of this, and at least get grease lines down to probably 4 of the ugliest bearings on that front end. So, like I said, if I was a contortionist or a double jointed midget in here, and I could fold myself up and crawl under there, well, that's all fine and dandy, but you know what? The average dude crawling around under there, it is not easy to work on. And what complicates things is when you don't have grease fittings in the right position. So to alleviate all that, I'm going to look into the grease header and we'll go from there. But anyway, I got the machine back together. I altered for now that grease fitting. I put an extension on and I turned it toward the front so you can get at it. Greased all the chains, greased all the bearings, and I pulled the brake pads on this too because it wasn't steering quite right. So I also I didn't show that. I pulled the brake pads out of this and I sprayed them with brake cleaner. And then I scotch brighted the surface of them a little bit, just slightly, roughed them up, took a glaze off them, whatever. Put them back in. So now I figure it should work pretty good. It was not bad, but I knew I had affected it with a bit of oil. And those brake discs, just like a car or anything, you really shouldn't even be handling them with your skin either, even human oil or anything on there. Keep those clean and dry when you install them, and keep the lubricants away from your brake discs, because hey, that on this it just raises hell. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, you guys. I'm going to put the firewall back in, and I'm pretty much done here on this machine for now on this job, but that should be it for now. And I see a whole lot of accessories for this machine. Oh my God, there's accessories. They're endless for this machine. I see some really cool accessories. But I think one of the first accessories that I would put on this Argo, again, number 1 would be the grease header. That's pretty important. But number 2 would be the bush bumper on the front with the winch. You need a bumper on the front of these machines. I mean, if you're going through the bush, not to smash trees down and stuff, but I'm saying high weeds, brush, anything to protect that front end and your lights and, you know, your plasticky front end. It's nice to have it protected. So anyway, those are 2 things I'm looking at, but we'll just see what happens, and that's it. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. I'm just out here in the shop. We've sprung back with the daylight clock times. We fell back now, so it's getting darker earlier, and it's just nasty out there. So I thought today's a perfect day to work in the shop. But thanks for tuning in. I've got everything under control here, and I'll catch you on the next one, and we'll go from there, and we'll see what else is going on with this Argo. Okay, thanks for tuning in.